My name is Bartlomiej Kot, and I'm delighted to welcome Pavel Havlicek, Research Fellow in Czech think tank AMO and James Denton Transatlantic Fellow at CEPA, previously with the Brussels office of the GMF. Ahoj, Pavle, rád tě vidím.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
We had a couple of interesting events recently when it comes to Russia and Belarus, and surely a couple important coming this week. So starting from Navalny's case up to meeting between Lukashenko and Putin in Sochi, and the EU debating on additional sanctions towards Russia. Pavel, were you surprised with the result of Borrell's visit to Moscow?
Thank you so much, Bartek, for once again for this question. Honestly, not so much, because we know that the former Spanish foreign minister and the current high rep of the EU is much lagging behind in terms of diplomatic skills, when compared with the long-term Russian foreign minister Sergei Lavrov. We knew that this would be a difficult fight in terms of rhetorics, in any case, because of the certain qualities of the Soviet diplomatic schools that certainly Mr. Lavrov has. But there were certain elements that were certainly surprising, even to me and other observers of the EU-Russia relations. And these are namely at the level of preparation from the Russian side. How carefully was everything crafted, namely the supposed leakage of the expulsion of 3 EU diplomats from Russia, just at the very moment when the press conference between Mr. Borrell and Lavrov was taking place. But obviously there were other things around, namely also the trial of Navalny on Friday, on the main day of Mr. Borrell's visit to Moscow, and at the same time also the level of disinformation and propaganda that the Russian machine actually launched during the 3-day long visit of Mr. Borrell to Moscow. So there were certain elements that were probably underestimated from the EU side, but in any case, we knew that this would be a difficult fight, difficult, kind of rhetorical kind of battle between the 2 diplomats.
Okay, so what are the lessons learned for us in the EU?
I think the first lesson learned, and this we had to learn really hard way, is that Russia is simply not interested. Russia doesn't care. We heard that during the visit of Mr. Borrell to Moscow, but also later when Mr. Lavrov actually announced that Russia is ready for a breakdown of diplomatic relations with the EU. This is something that we had to learn. Just once again, there was a long-term rhetoric, about, the decadence of the West and so on and so forth, and efforts to isolate Russia. But this time we really learned hard way that Russia doesn't care about the mutual relations and it wants to isolate as much as it can. So I think these are the 2 primary lessons learned. Finally, I would say, and this came also a little bit later during the consequent meeting between the Finnish foreign minister and once again his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, when Lavrov said that Russia is not interested in having basically any contacts with the EU institutions, and that it will pursue its relations with individual member states. So the traditional divide and rule game is once again back in place, and will be the future tactics if Russia is gonna care about Europe at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we speak on Monday, the EU is working on new sanctions against Russia, actually, even this hour. In your opinion, do those sanctions work, or shall we switch to a very different approach towards Russia?
I think they work to some degree because there is a whole number of them already in place. These are sanctions against individuals, including the ones from last year after, as a consequence of the Navalny poisoning, in which most probably the Russian secret services, namely FSB, was involved. So there was a number of actors included to the sanction list of individuals just last year. But these were also systematic, broad sectoral sanctions that were employed by the EU after 2014 and the start of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, both in the east of the country, in Donbass, but also after the illegal annexation of Crimea. So we have a whole number of sanctions already in place, but so we still see that there is some space for improvement. This was also vocalized and very much articulated very clearly by Navalny team. Now the couple of colleagues, namely Leonid Volkov, but also the head of Anti-Corruption Foundation, Mr. Zhdanov, who met with EU diplomats just yesterday, they once again reiterated that there is a number of people, individuals on the Russian side, not only the official side, but also oligarchic circles, which who are supposed to be on the sanction list of the EU, and this way that the EU should very clearly indicate that what is now happening in the EU-Russia relations and also in Russia domestically is not normal, and the EU should be refusing that. So this is the symbolical, diplomatic, but also very clearly political level. I believe that if this huge wave of repression, and don't forget, this is one of the biggest, we are seeing one of the biggest repression wave in the recent years, and in Russia these days, if this is going to continue before the September parliamentary elections in Russia to the State Duma, then the EU should be prepared to step up its also sectoral sanctions and also include more entities, more also sectors and parts of the Russian economy, just because there is no other way how the EU can be responding to what is now happening in Russia.
Okay.
Last remark on this one: we have a new since last December, we have a new instrument in place, which is the EU Global Magnitsky Act, and we need to be putting that in practice. There are discussions about this, but I think the sooner we start putting that in practice, and there are already good signals that today will be the day when the green light is given by the EU foreign ministers, I think the better it is for responding to the brutality of the regime, which we need to clearly differentiate from the people.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we speak about this clarity of message, do you believe there is a space for a coherent European Union's policy towards Russia right now? I mean, the one that actually could exceed only the fact of communicating of common interests in terms of democracy or human rights. Let's say a common approach towards Nord Stream 2.
I believe that we need to go this way. It will be painful, and this is also what I try to advocate for in my new op-ed piece for German Marshall Fund, where I say that the costs of divided EU foreign policy are simply too high to continue. It is not sustainable to have the German foreign policy on Russia, to have the French foreign policy on Russia, and then have the rest of EU member states and their own foreign policies on Russia. This is not a way forward, and everybody knows that. This is especially after the wake-up call in Moscow, after the Borrell's visit. But I believe that there will be that there is a momentum in this regard, that we are seeing just in front of our eyes. And I'm saying that not just because of this failed visit of Mr. Borrell, but also due to several factors that we have in place. These are first of all the new U.S. administration that will be very much supportive, and we heard that just last Friday during the Munich conference, where the new president, Joe Biden, announced the United States are back. This is a very important message for the EU and its foreign policy. Second, Angela Merkel, who is on one hand the primary crisis solver and crisis manager in the EU these days, but also a chief defendant of the Nord Stream 2 is leaving. There will be a new establishment, slowly but surely, the latest in autumn after the elections. And finally, there are new opportunities also, and this is also on the agenda just today, a new project that is pioneered by the EES, which is called Strategic Compass. And this is exactly the EU initiative that is to do and deal with kind of putting the EU foreign policies and EU national visions of strategic kind of outlook of the world, who is the friend, who is the enemy, to put that on the same page all across the 27 EU member states. So I see these as potential opportunities to reunify, to come back to some consensus, beyond what you mentioned as this elementary consensus that we had in place since 2016, and even that was severely shaken, including by the Borrell's visit to Moscow.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad that you raised the issue of the U.S. engagement in this whole thing. Well, we are still in the honeymoon with the Biden's administration regarding future transatlantic relations. In what way shall we, the European Union, incorporate the common attitude towards Russia and Belarus? I'm asking about a very palpable, very concrete measures. How would you incorporate the US into that?
Mm-hmm. I believe the first step will be already done today when Mr. State Secretary Blinken is actually attending the foreign minister's visit. This is a very important gesture, also symbolical gesture that we are trying to cooperate. We are trying to overbridge the gap that was there during the 4-year long presidency of Donald Trump. I think this is the right approach. I am arguing that these commonalities and the future synergies between the EU and the United States are not only in the direction of Russia, and here much more can be done. In fact, of making the sanction regime more efficient, reaching out to the Russian citizens, in terms of visa liberalization, support for the youth, offering different scholarship options, to bring up a new generation pro-democratic Russians, when people in Eastern Europe, in broader terms, there are numerous opportunities where this can be done, but also there are many homeworks that we have in the West. And here, only through efficient cooperation between the United States and the EU, some of the gaps can be closed. And I'm here speaking namely about, fight against corruption, money laundering, and all these illicit practices that we are seeing on everyday basis from Russia, from China, which are just undermining our own, Western resilience, and these are not just financial operations. These are, protection of strategic assets. Now in Czechia, we are discussing about who will invest into our nuclear power station, Dukovany, and the government is still okay with Russia putting its money and leg in the door. So these are just unacceptable things, and here both the EU but also the United States really need to come together and support to counter these practices, but also proactively reach out to the societies in Russia, but also in the wider neighborhood and Western Balkans, because these are our priority areas where we can't be just tolerating, interference of these third parties. Finally, and let me stop on this one, obviously the COVID-19 pandemic is a huge challenge to everybody. And one of the most recent challenges is indeed the vaccine diplomacy. We have seen that enormously from Russia and China, especially in Eastern neighborhood, where some of the countries, including Moldova, Ukraine, also Belarus, but also South Caucasian countries are simply lacking any means available at this stage. And the COVAX initiative that the world leaders also prized and promised to bolster just on Friday is still not delivering yet. So we need to show our solidarity solidarity. We need to be there and counter these third parties when trying to win the hearts and minds of the people in Eastern Europe, but also Western Balkans and elsewhere in our closest neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lavrov called the EU a partner that's not reliable for Russia, and that was actually an expression that wasn't challenged at all by Borrell during the conference. But Pavel, are we actually reliable partners when it comes to the democratic side in Belarus or Russia right now? Do you believe that we are reliable when it comes to supporting the Democrats there?
I believe we are. It is not always a very strong support, but the support of towards, for example, the Belarusian opposition has been there since the beginning. So just have a look at the statements and the level of activity of the EU diplomats, just after the 9th of August, when the enormously falsified electoral process in Belarus, the so-called presidential elections, when this all happened and the enormous level of brutality of the Belarusian regime, for example, started, in the days after following after the 9th of August, the foreign minister met within a week time just to speak about Belarus. In 2 week time, there was already this extraordinary European Council that also the Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki and Czech Prime Minister Babiš helped to put together. So I think these are concrete gestures. These are concrete initiatives. Just don't forget about the 50 million that the EU has dedicated to support Belarusian citizens, civil society, independent media. I think we are there. Sometimes the European response is slow, but I would not mistake that for being absent at all. I think we are really standing up for our values. It is sometimes a fragmented support. It is sometimes insufficient support. But these are just the modalities of the support, which is always has been there and is still there until today. And I believe that while there are ways to improve and we should be brainstorming on how to make it more efficient, we are a reliable partner for all pro-democracy and freedom-loving people in Eastern Partnership countries, but also in Russia itself, because the EU and Mr. Borrell, don't forget about this, the visit was much criticized, but the one message that he delivered quite clearly was that things are not okay when it comes to the brutality against Russian citizens and all the kind of falsified and manipulated court trial against Mr. Navalny. This was clearly refused, even if this was then overshadowed by other insufficient expressions and lack of activity on other fronts by Mr. Borrell himself.
Mm-hmm. Well, Monday today is also the day of Lukashenko and Putin's meeting in Sochi. Well, as far as I understand, the meeting is not focused on financial support, but rather defense issues. Do you see a common ground between the events in Russia and Belarus recently? How will those gentlemen cooperate in opposing the democratic unrest right now?
I believe that while we have seen a lot of solidarity between the pro-democracy camps, both in Russia and in Belarus, we also see this high level of cooperation and lesson learning, actually, from, in case of Russia, from Belarus and vice versa. So the resistance of these regimes as well. So I think it is very important to see how closely intertwined are the Belarusian public space with the Russian one. Both camps, both the pro-democracy one and the regime one are exchanging notes. They are expressing repeatedly their solidarity on the side of the protesters, but then also exchanging the most brutal and undemocratic practices on the side of the regime. And don't forget that this is not a surprising timing, that this visit comes to place, and these are both for Belarusian domestic processes, because the regime of Lukashenko has been very sluggish and very slow on reforming the constitutional order, and this was one of the, don't forget, one of the primary requests from Russia to change the Belarusian constitution and to allow for more parliamentary forces, meaning also Russian allies, to come to place and to join the decision-making process much more robustly than it was in the past. And last point, it is not surprising and it is not a coincidence that the two leaders are meeting exactly at the same time when the European Foreign Affairs Council is convening in Brussels and having Russia, but also events in Belarus on the agenda. So these are not surprising news. We need to make the right conclusion that both of the regimes are they do care. They see that the West is watching them and taking measures, and this is very important. I'm very happy that they are meeting and they are trying to discuss the escape strategies, and how to avoid some of the Western criticism and pressure, because this is what really matters here.
Mm-hmm. Well, talking about Belarus, most experts are likely to see protests in Belarus resuming in spring. But let me just jump into Russia once again. How long do you believe that Russian opposition can build up on the momentum resulting from Navalny's imprisonment? Are we actually seeing the unrest exceeding Moscow and Petersburg? Do we actually see the democratic unrest in Russia in the province?
Yes, I would very much say that we are, because one of the new elements of the most recent wave of protest that started on the 23rd of January and then continued on the 31st and then the 2nd of February earlier this month, it was the regional component and a number of new faces that we saw joining the protest. According to some surveys, these were even 42%, that of new people that actually came out to streets in Moscow. So these are very interesting and exciting numbers. And the situation has been even more exciting in this sense in the Russian regions, in provinces. Especially in some of the cities and towns in Siberia, where, according to some information, the last really big and substantial protests were happening exactly 100 years ago during the Russian Civil War times. So we are seeing some of new dynamics, some of new elements, new faces, generational turnout also. There is especially the kind of generation in the productive age, not a very young one, not how the Russian propaganda reported that these are, people around 18 years of age. These are very important, but still on a marginal side. These are people in their productive age that went out to streets and really expressed their unwillingness to stay with the same for the last to continue to obey the regime that has been around for the last 20 years. And this is very important. But just to turn the page a little bit, we will see a lot of tactics, tactics from the side of the Russian opposition, because the wave of protests, led to mass criminalization, detentions. More than 12,000 people were actually put behind bars, over the 2-3 week period. So then the Russian opposition, and namely Leonid Volkov, he actually announced that there will be some regrouping, and that the protests will start again later on, when both the conditions, namely also the weather conditions, but also when they reestablish themselves, because it is important to keep the eyes on the ball, and the ball is the upcoming September parliamentary elections, for which, if once again the Russian regime decides to extend the voting period up to 2, 3, maybe 4 days, supposedly, and these are information that were given to us by the Russian opposition and civil society, up to 500,000 of observers might be needed to really keep an eye on what's happening in the country, which is a very substantial number, and the opposition is focusing on the vote. That will be very important for showing how illegitimate is the regime now in Russia.
And what about Belarus? What is the future of democratic unrest in Belarus?
Belarusian affairs are now interesting, and I just saw the piece of news from a couple of days ago when Sviatlana Tsikhanouska actually announced that they are in retreat when she spoke with the Swiss newspaper, and she admitted that domestically inside of Belarus, they are unable to cope with the enormous level of brutality that the Lukashenko regime is exercising. So she admitted that things are not developing in the way they would like to. And we know that. We just need to be honest about this, because it will not be, and we knew that for quite some time, that this will not be a single instance fight, that one big battle that will just take days, but this will be a longer position conflict, that will require enormous energy and also resources over a long period of time. So now it seems that we are entering a new period of the protest, which from one side, some people say, look, they will come back in spring, but others say that they will need to transform and to look for new venues, and opportunities. And I see that the second way, actually. And we know that the Belarusian opposition, people like Tsikhanouska, but also Pavel Latushka and Mr. and Mrs. Tsepkala, they're very talented and very skillful when it comes to international advocacy, criminal proceedings, and legal justice, looking for additional opportunities abroad, especially with the European EU member states, but also the United States and other international stakeholders, including the UN, OSCE, Council of Europe, and others. But they are simply when they want to remain peaceful, and this is the main message from their side, they can't be competing with this huge level of brutality, torture, and putting people behind the bars in Belarus. So there are clear limits to what they can be doing themselves. So I think we need some kind of transformation from their side, and still a continuous and a consistent level of support from the EU and the West, including in terms of financial support, technical support, capacity building, to really help re-establish some of the pro-democracy camps, and maybe give that some kind of very concrete, maybe less ambitious, but very concrete outputs that they can be possibly achieving.
Thank you very much, Pavel. That was actually a very good summary at the end of that. Thank you for providing us with your knowledge. Let's keep an eye on the ball, as I said. Allow me just to encourage everyone watching us to follow our upcoming events via our social media channels. See you soon. Do widzenia. Na shledanou.
Thank you so much, Bartek. It was my pleasure.